Hello and welcome to Wine Blast. This is our news and views show where we selectively recap on the key wine headlines in recent months and respond to your various questions and comments, which always keep us on our toes.
Yes, thank you to everyone who's been in touch. We've got our Guess the Missing Word in the Wine headline game. Always a highlight.
Who doesn't love that?
We'll be touching on locations as wide-ranging as Pompeii, Essex, Vanuatu and deep space. On personalities from Pope Francis to Bridget Jones, as well as perhaps other surprising things, including vandals, a variety of wildlife and Irish peewee wine.
The mind boggles. But before we start, we wanted to mention subscriptions, didn't we?
We did, quite right. So I know we've mentioned this before, but we have finally got around to making it happen. Starting with our next season, 7, we'll be launching subscriptions across a range of platforms from Apple Podcasts to Spotify and Buzzsprout, our hosting platform. We would massively appreciate you supporting Wine Blast. As loyal listeners will know, there is a huge amount of work that goes into making the show happen, and we are going to need your support to ensure it continues to thrive.
Subscribers will get early access to all shows, plus exclusive access to our archive shows, and a new mini-series of full-length interviews. Wine Blast has been graced by the likes of John Malkovich, Hugh Johnson, Tim Spector, Sam Neill, Oz Clarke, Charles Spence, and many legendary winemakers from Miguel Torres Sr. to Virginia Wilcock, Larry Cherubino, Fernando Mora, Fauzi Issa, and more. But we always have to edit them right down. So this is your chance to hear these superstars unfined and unfiltered in their full glory, as it were.
We'll also be doing more intriguing interviews for this very reason. And we will have further tasty subscriber treats to offer in due course too. Anyway, we wanted to give you fair warning of our plans. Some of our plans, I guess, because we will have a few more exciting new developments coming up, which will be airing very soon. But we just don't want to spoil all the surprises.
Oh, where's the fun without the surprises, eh?
Exactly.
Right, on that mysterious note, let's dive into the headlines. And we're going to start with the news that alcohol has been found in deep space. A study in astronomy and astrophysics, as covered in the drinks business, reported the detection of propanol from Sagittarius B2, a vast cloud of gas, dust, and clearly booze, located around 26,000 light years from Earth.
Yeah, shame it's a bit far away, isn't it? But ethanol is the main alcohol in our wine, and that has also been detected in space, along with methanol. But this is the first time that propanol form of alcohol has been detected in space. Researchers also found ethyl formate, the molecule responsible, as you will well know, for the scent of rum and raspberries.
So what does this mean? Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think it's that astronauts need to put the top back on their rum bottles, is it? On one level, it offers a glimpse into how chemically rich space may be. But more intriguingly, the presence of complex organic molecules like these and others in space would seem to support the theory that the basic building blocks of life are not unique to Earth. So if they arrived here, they could just as easily have arrived elsewhere too.
So somewhere else in the universe, they may be raising a glass of fine Carmenere too, you know.
Could be.
And the reason I mentioned Carmenere is that these results were delivered by the ALMA array in the northern Atacama Desert in Chile. Just one more string to Chile's bow in terms of, spotting the next big booze trend.
And talking of trends, the latest update from the OIV in April 2025 has confirmed that 2024 was indeed something of an annus horribilis for wine. Wine production was down 5% from the already historically low 2023. In fact, it's the lowest in over 60 years. Wine consumption fell by more than 3%. The global vineyard continued to shrink, reaching 7.1 million hectares after 4 consecutive years of decline. As for what happened to international trade in wine, you guessed it, also down, with volumes sticking at their lowest since 2010.
So what's going on? And are there any silver linings here? In terms of the why, The big headline that the OIV points to is climate change, or as they term it, extreme or atypical meteorological events as the key influence on global production, with early frosts, heavy rainfall and prolonged drought dramatically impacting vineyard productivity. You could also add, I guess, rot, heat, winds, hail and disease in there too. But of course, another thing fueling lower production is just fewer vines in the ground. All around the world, we're hearing of vineyards being ripped out because the demand simply isn't there.
And that brings us on to changing consumption trends, doesn't it? I mean, put simply, the world is drinking less. One significant player in this picture is China, where consumption plummeted by more than 19% in 2024, which is an ongoing trend there, as we've discussed before on the pod. But elsewhere, 15 of the top 20 wine markets in the world reported a reduction in consumption compared to 2023. The OIV pointed, and I quote, to evolving lifestyle preferences, shifting social habits and generational changes in consumer behaviour. And they also stated how this is now intersecting with a particularly challenging economic environment. In other words, inflation means wine is getting more expensive at a time when people can afford it less.
Yeah, the other technical term to use here is of course, a clusterfuck. I hesitate to use the term. I use it rarely, but that's kind of, if you wanted to sum up the OIV's report in one word, that would be it. Maybe they could use that in the next press release. But what are the positive news? Well, the vineyard is shrinking less quickly than before. Also, while international trade in wine was down in volume, overall value and average prices held up, which would support the notion that while the world may be drinking less, it's drinking better. Although, of course, it could just as likely be that inflation means the same wine is just more expensive.
More expensive, yeah. Now, as for which countries are doing their bit, Italy, Spain, Russia, Portugal and Hungary are the only significant wine-consuming countries to have registered an increase in consumption in 2024. The largest consuming countries by volume, though, remain the US, France, Italy, Germany and the UK. Portugal has the highest per capita wine consumption, 61 litres. By comparison, the UK is 22, a mere 22. The US is 12. And interestingly, France is at 42, a figure that's fallen by 65% since the 1960s. And that's according to the EU Wine Market Observatory.
Yeah, but does this perfect storm, as the OIV termed it, spell the end of days for wine, or is it a case of painful transition from past to present to future? Our money is on the latter. We've noted in previous episodes how wine has become a far more global drink and widely traded commodity than ever before, meaning it has more commercial resilience and opportunities. The notable trends seem to tie in with the world drinking less but better, which is no bad thing for people's health and wine's commercial viability if wineries are properly set up to cater for that. And lo and behold, a recent Italian study is also optimistic, confidently identifying 2026 as the year things will start to look up for wine.
Yeah, this was a study entitled Resilience and Preparedness for the Next Global Wine Consumption Cycle by an economics professor in Bordeaux and a wine professor in Verona. Now, they point to the potential of emerging global markets, the earning power of wine tourism, and premiumization trends as grounds for optimism. They cite diversification, innovation, and transparent information management as vital attributes for those who will be successful.
They also warn, tellingly, that recovery will not simply be a repetition of the past. The sociology of consumption has changed, and the next cycle will feature new trends and consumers. Nevertheless, they add, if inflation is kept under control, 2026 could mark the turning point with the start of a recovery phase in 2027 for new, sustained growth for the wine sector.
Fingers crossed. Now, talking of growth and silver linings, how about this for a headline from Decanter? Essex bucks trend as global vineyard prices stutter.
Yes.
Now, we've just heard how things are looking dicey for wine across the world, and the 2025 Wealth Report by Knight Frank, the global real estate company, identified average vineyard prices declining in regions like Marlborough in New Zealand, down 33%, Carneros in California, down 15%, and Côte d'Rône and Barossa, down 10%.
But what was up was Stellenbosch, the Loire Valley, Barolo, and topping the charts.
Go on.
Go on.
Go on.
Go on.
The only way is Essex.
Essex. Up a staggering 20% to an average value of $120,000 per hectare, according to the report. Roughly comparable prices to Marlborough, interestingly.
Yeah, no, we're not going to go into this too much because, teaser alert, we have an episode on Essex coming soon with some very exciting things in there. Because while Knight Frank refers to Essex's wine scene as embryonic, it does seem to have a very bright future ahead.
Indeed it does. Indeed it does. Picking up on the theme of the future, some sad news, actually. In our Vines of the Future episode back in December 2024, we reported excitedly about the first ever plantings of gene-edited or assisted evolution vines in Europe. The plantings, which went into the ground in September 2024, were the result of considerable hard work by Mario Pezzotti and his team at Edivite at the University of Verona. The aim was to study them to see how they develop, particularly with regard to disease resistance. The idea being that these plants would have resistance to downy mildew and thus need significantly less vineyard intervention like spraying, hence reduced associated impact.
The vines were planted in a secure compound with fences and locks and cameras. Even so, when we spoke to him originally, Mario did ominously say, "I hope there won't be any vandalism, but who knows?" And much to Mario and his team's frustration, on the night of the 12th and 13th of February 2025, vandals broke into the secure compound and ripped the vines out of the ground. No doubt because of anti-GMO sentiment or whatever, even though these vines are explicitly not GMO and could hold significant value in terms of sustainability.
Yeah, we got in touch with Mario as soon as we heard the news, and he replied to us saying the following. We are truly shocked by this act of vandalism, but we will not give up. Science must go on, and research deserves to be respected by all. We hope the plants will recover, but if not, we have additional vines to replace them. This is a setback, but it will not stop our work and dedication. He also sent us some photos, which we'll put on our show notes for anyone interested.
Interestingly, this happened around the same time that news emerged of a new trial in Coonawarra, Australia, by Treasury Wine Estates in conjunction with Australia's National Science Agency, or CSIRO. Now, the aim is to develop new vines using the best heritage vine material from the famous Coonawarra estate Wynns, which is owned by TWE, but incorporating mildew-resistant genes from CSIRO's breeding stock.
Now, the idea, according to CSIRO research scientist and project lead Dr. Paul Boss, is to breed mildew resistance into elite vines, giving future vines a genetic advantage to withstand pathogens that cost the Australian wine sector an estimated 160 million Australian dollars in management expenses and production losses every year. So another interesting one to watch there.
As is a potential new winery for Pompeii. Now, this famous archaeological site, once a thriving town before it was buried under a cataclysmic eruption from Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, was no stranger to wine. Only recently, an enormous frieze depicting the ecstatic followers of Dionysus, the god of wine, was uncovered, one of many wine-related finds in Pompeii.
Yeah, we're sort of ecstatic followers of Dionysus, aren't we, too? Maybe,
You might be.
Maybe we'll find a frieze of us in Pompeii. I know if it was
You've got a fancy dress
the
costume
Wine
of
Blast
Dionysus.
podcast live recording. But now a new winery, as you say, is planned to recreate the viticulture of this ancient civilization. The Tenute Capaldo group, which incorporates the well-known producer Feudi di San Gregorio, will establish a 6-hectare organic vineyard and winery within the archaeological site. This follows on from decades of botanical research to analyse the vineyards of Pompeii. The idea is to tell the story of the ancient city from a wine perspective, I guess. As for the Pompeii wines you'll be able to try in the future, they'll be made from the Greco and Aglianico grape varieties.
Sounds right up your street.
It
Ancient
is.
history and wine. If only there was a way to get the Simpsons involved too.
The dream.
Anyway, continuing the Italian theme, and given it's such recent news, we couldn't not mention the death of Pope Francis. Yeah. He was a true champion of wine, like very few modern-day leaders. Yeah. He famously told the crowd in St. Peter's Square in 2016, "Wine expresses the abundance of the banquet and the joy of the feast. Imagine finishing the wedding feast drinking tea. It would be an embarrassment."
Yeah, I hope that wasn't a dig at the English. Just so
I'm not sure we do that anymore.
But carrying on the theme, apparently when a delegation of Italian wine producers went to visit him in 2024, Pope Francis told them, "Wine, the land, farming skills and entrepreneurial activity are gifts from God. But let us not forget that the Creator has entrusted them to us, to our sensitivity and honesty, so that we may make them, as Scripture says, a true source of joy for the heart of man and of every man, not just those who have more possibilities."
Yeah, I mean, he was quite an egalitarian and an environmentalist, wasn't he? Which explains his antipathy towards certain politicians. But yeah, I mean, he really praised the Italian wine producers for caring for the environment and helping encourage, as he said, healthy consumer habits.
Yeah, he also wonderfully sanctioned a new project in 2024, so not long before he died, to plant vines in the papal summer residence of Castel Gandolfo, 2 hectares of Cabernet Sauvignon, incidentally, to be made by Italian consultant winemaker Ricardo Cotarella. Apparently the Pope had said to Cotarella, "You can't party without wine."
He is our kind of Pope. Right. To finish off the
Quite
news.
right as well, by the way.
Well, there's just time, I think, isn't there, for our Guess the Missing Word in the headline slot?
Here we go.
Oh,
Come
there
on,
is.
strap
There
in.
is.
Come on.
I'm going to go first.
Go on.
With a fairly easy one, I think, even for you.
Yep.
Bridget Jones fever boosts what sales?
Sales of extra large granny pants. So many.
Extra large Simpsons granny pants?
Well, I know. I don't think they exist. Maybe they do. Who knows? I haven't shopped in that particular part of the merch area.
I'm sure it's to be found.
It's got to be Chardonnay, doesn't it?
I think that's too easy, isn't it? For anyone who happens not to have seen the Bridget Jones films, Bridge, as she's known, is rather partial to a large glass of Chardonnay. The latest instalment, Bridget Jones, Mad About the Boy, broke box office records in early 2025, in the wake of which British supermarket Waitrose reported double-digit growth in sales of various Chardonnay wines. We definitely endorse that.
We would, big Chardonnay fans. I mean, did you drink a bit of that Chardonnay when you went to watch it?
Oh, I drink Chardonnay anytime.
Yeah, you do.
Chardonnay, breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Yeah, especially when watching Bridget Jones. Right, my turn. What can smell the difference between Riesling and Sauvignon Blanc?
Well, most people, I would say. I mean, it's not usually particularly difficult, is it?
Maybe not. But, it may be if you consider that this was actually sommelier rats can smell the difference between Riesling
sommelier rats
and Sauvignon. Well, I think they were rats.
Where
I think the sommelier was more of the headline, kind of over-egging it. Anyway, someone really did this experiment. This is the fact I love. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they felt sorry for the rats, after having had a tough life having been experimented on all the time. Maybe they thought they needed to show the rats a good time.
A party.
I'd be all in favour
rats
of that.
Partying with wine.
Go. So anyway, the rats had to poke a lever corresponding to the different wines. They were trained. Then they had an exam.
This can't be true. This is a joke.
Is this
on the 1st of April?
The trained rats got it right 94% of the time.
Well, they probably massively outperform us masters of wine, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and apparently, though, there was one rat called Peanuts who let the side down by totally flunking the exam. Again, it's very relatable.
Okay, so I've got another one. So first vintage from Bhutan fetches what?
Bhutan, the country. Well, After the animal references I've got going on in my mind now, I'm tempted to say a stick. It fetched a stick, but that's just wrong. That's just word association.
No.
I mean, I guess it's either going to be a lot of money or not very much money, or a lot of yaks.
No, you were right first time. And first vintage from Bhutan fetches $74,250 at auction.
Yeah, that's not bad.
So, Bhutan, the famously reclusive mountain kingdom in the Himalayas, has an ambitious new wine project with vineyards ranging from 150 to 2,790 metres altitude. Now, after gifting a 7.5 litre bottle to the King of Bhutan, they held an auction for their first vintage. Now, this auction featured 21 lots, including guided tours of Bhutan and private tastings, and they raised, as I've said, over $74,000. That's not bad
it's
going,
not bad
is it?
How do we miss
for a
this
first
auction?
wine?
And on that note, I suppose one other teaser we could mention is that we are going to be revisiting mountain territory, not a million miles away from Bhutan, on another Wine Blast adventure very soon.
Teaser.
So keep your ears peeled for that one. Okay, last one. Professional wrestling legend goes viral after what?
This doesn't sound very wine-like, but I could say body slamming Bridget Jones. Wrestling a Jeroboam of Cristal.
No, I'm going to stop you there before your fevered imagination goes any further. It's actually after a wine tasting in Napa where he described the winery rescue kitty, Mr. Tubbs, as a solid ass cat. So this is Steve Austin from Texas, a WWE icon, apparently famous for having a cantankerous character in the ring. Big guy, of course. He popped into Biodynamic Napa Winery, Filer Estate, to taste some wine and shared a photo with his 7 million Instagram followers of him cuddling Mr. Tubbs. People are now demanding this become a regular TV series of Steve and other solid-ass cats, ideally at wineries, of course.
Oh, gosh. I think on that note, we've covered all the key news, haven't we? I mean, key news. I mean, really
just
key.
vital.
Yeah.
Indispensable.
So coming up, we are fielding your questions and input, including some dissenting voices. To recap so far, Essex, Pompeii and Bhutan wines are on the up, while global wine is in the doldrums. Vandals have been setting a bad example on the new wave vine front, while the recently deceased Pope Francis set a fine example on the wine front. Plus, there's lots of alcohol in deep space.
Who needs more news than that? Come on. Okay, let's get stuck into your feedback. First up, it's Paul Davis from Wimbledon.
Really enjoyed your episode recently on different wine glasses. Recently, I got rid of all my old Riedels because they're looking a bit old, and I moved to Jancis Robinson's and not looked back. Fabulous glasses, and I love the simplicity of just having one. Interesting, at the end, you were talking about stemless, and you didn't mention, for me, the main advantage of them is for those friends who like to move their hands a lot when they're talking, particularly as they've got a few glasses of wine into them, and they start moving them even more, not having those tall stems, waiting for the glasses to be knocked over, and increasing my stress levels as their hands are moving around the table. Big advantage to prevent breakages from those animated friends. Anyway, I love the podcast. Keep up the great work. Speak soon. Bye.
We've all got those friends, haven't we? Yeah. The excitable ones.
Yeah.
In fact, lots of people have said similar things after this episode, haven't they? So
everyone's blaming their friends. I think they're getting that in.
So, Paul, your story about these friends making you stressed, it did make us laugh. And good tip on the stemless glass front too. We've actually got, I don't know, I should admit this, but we've got some plastic stemless Govino glasses, and maybe they're the ultimate go-to for animated friends.
Yeah, or maybe just clumsy me, whatever, or just some
all of us.
They actually work really well. So yeah, anyway, it's all in the mix, isn't it? We did indeed have some good feedback after our Do You Need More Than One Wine Glass episode, including some Riedel Ultra fans or employees questioning Jackie Yang's work, some of which was fair, some of which was not particularly valid in our view. You can read the discussion on our Instagram feed, where you can make up your own mind about all of this. You'll also find other views not dissimilar to Paul's too.
Now, we did have some questions asking why we didn't cover the ISO or ISO glass favoured by wine educationalists the world over. For us, though, the ISO glass is more a functional bit of kit than something to really savour and enjoy a wine out of. It's a bit too small and practical and pragmatic, but if you love an ISO glass, you go for it.
Yeah, it also kind of reminds us of exams, I suppose, as well. There's that association. Yeah. Anyway, sticking with another recent episode, our fake wine show starring The Simpsons did cause a bit of a ruckus. Not necessarily in the way we would have imagined, though. It got picked up quite widely in the national, even international press, the Daily Telegraph, Express, Daily Mail, Drinks Business, MSN, for example, and it led to some rather sensationalist headlines and content, particularly concerning fake yellowtail wines in the UK.
So a yellowtail spokesperson said in response, and I quote, "Our supply chain is extremely robust, with all major supermarkets, wholesalers and off licenses purchasing directly from us. We want to reassure customers that counterfeit yellowtail is minimal."
Meanwhile, thanks to listeners Patricia and Richard, who recently kindly said hello and how much they love the show in person. As for how this ties in with the episode, well, Richard asked me if I was wearing my Simpsons pants. Please, can we not let this become a thing? That's just a general appeal.
That's your
Public
fault.
general appeal. That was your fault. You were the one who brought it up.
Bring this on yourself.
I may wear them, but I do this in secret, largely. Anyway.
Not any longer.
Well, no, exactly. And Patricia kindly wrote afterwards, after she said hello, to say not only thank you for making my favourite podcast, but also gloriously and very aptly to quote Homer Simpson's famous line, "To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems."
Now, another episode that was picked up on in the press was our Wine in a Can show, starring the inimitable Marcel Lucon, among other distinguished guests. "Drinking wine from a can is not to be sniffed at," ran the Telegraph headline, and "Wine in a tin tastes as good as a bottle," said the Sun.
I think you should have different accents for those headlines, but let's not go there. But there were dissenting voices here too. "No, thank you," said Donald Boyle. "The problem is that you can't age wine in a can. I would never even be willing to buy good reds in a can. Ever." And he wrote ever in full capitals with 2 exclamation marks. Lisa McBain wrote, "I just can't get beyond the taste of aluminium on my lips."
Now, Lisa's point is valid, of course, if you're swigging straight from the can, which we have to admit at least one of our expert guests did endorse. But Lisa also agrees that if you pour the wine into a glass, cans are a decent format and a good way to move away from heavy glass.
And that's the kind of thing we imagine people would pour into a glass, really.
Mostly, I think, unless you're desperate. Now, as for Donald, we take his point that Lafite in a can might not really work, but the idea is that cans are suitable for fairly fast turnover wines, which is the vast majority. I mean, interestingly, though, while 2 years is an accepted consensus on the shelf life for cans, as we said in the episode, we tried canned wine that was 5 years old and it was fine.
Tasted fine, didn't it? And, thanks everyone for the many positive comments about that episode and wine in cans generally. Anyone who drinks wine should listen to this, said Vin Can. Who are we to disagree? Talking of positive comments, here's what Paul Etherington had to say about a different episode.
Really enjoyed that latest show on Margaret River. I think it's just such a wonderful producing area. I was lucky enough to be introduced to the Mosswood Cab Sauv probably 20 years ago, so I've got a lot of vintages of that in the cellar, and their Chardonnay is just glorious as well. But it was really nice to hear from Vas Felix producer, and I had a Chardonnay of theirs a couple of weeks ago, and that was brilliant too. It's just such a wonderful, wonderful area. Thanks for giving us some insight into it.
Our pleasure, Paul. We absolutely loved doing that mini-series on Great Southern and Margaret River in Western Australia. I mean, we're also big fans of Mosswood and Vas Felix, so it was very exciting to be able to feature them. And Aussie wine fans need to keep ears peeled for some more exciting shows along these lines coming up in season 7.
Gosh, there are a lot of teasers in this show, aren't there? You know, we've got to be careful not to get reputation as teasers. Maybe we should just throw a bit of controversy into the mix. That'll distract everyone. And this controversy ensued after our insider's guide to acclaimed California producer Ridge vineyards.
Yeah. Now, we should probably start off by saying this was mostly well received. Also, Ridge Chairman Paul Draper very kindly emailed to say, "You two are impressive. You magically wove a most complete history, so well presented and done so briefly amazing." Neil Hogan wrote in to say how much he loved Ridge's Lytton Springs and Geyserville Zinfandels, which were once described to him by a wine importer as very swallowable. A great comment.
Very
swallowable.
Very swallowable. I mean, it's not an easy to pronounce word, is it?
It isn't.
But
not after you've had a glass or two.
It's a fantastic comment, isn't it? I know exactly what it is. That said, Chris Garner questioned the timing of covering US wine. And we did have an email from Jonas Lindström who said, "Love your podcast, but I'm going to skip this episode on Ridge. This is not the time for buying wine from the US. Boycotting is one of the few tools we have as consumers when we disagree with another country's policies. We have to do what feels right for us."
Yeah, so just as a quick explainer, perhaps especially if you're listening after mid-2025 of where we are now, President Trump's sweeping tariffs, and let's call them unorthodox policies, have been upsetting a lot of people all around the world. There have been calls for boycotts of US products in countries like Canada, for example. So we totally understand this perspective.
You know, in our defence, our episodes tend to be planned a fair while in advance, not always, but quite often. Plus, we feel it's better to confront and air these issues rather than ignoring or sweeping them under the carpet. We do specifically address the Trump issue in that episode, with Ridge making it very clear they oppose the president's policies. And maybe that's a subtle distinction between the duty of the media and consumers here.
Yeah, I mean, either way, Chris and Jonas and anyone else out there who feels similarly, we absolutely respect your opinion and thank you for sharing it. And fingers crossed this current nightmarish situation passes before too long and without too much lasting damage being done.
Now, switching to less politically divisive issues, Elin Pranter from Sweden was delighted we'd managed to do an episode on wine chemistry, which was her suggestion. Thank you, Elin. Thank you so much, she wrote to say. It was exactly what I wanted. I love how Gus Jou describes wine as both science and pleasure, because that's how I feel about a wine. I want to be moved, feel something every time I put my nose in the glass. And when I taste it, I want to have every emotion there is. But those emotions also bring questions. I think that's what I love about wine. You made it funny and interesting, and of course it brought me more questions. I bought Gus's book, and maybe we can come back to it again in the future.
Maybe, Ellen, maybe.
Yes.
Gus was certainly very kind, calling us true magicians and saying Wine Blast is fun, interactive and educational on another level. So we'll definitely be having him back on, won't we?
Get him back on.
Okay, so we're nearing the end of this News and Views episode, and there's just time to feature a couple of reviews. So Kira Hodge wrote in to say, "I came across your podcast last week and I love it. Great for commuting. I especially enjoyed the wine faults and wine chemistry episode. I'm on my wine diploma, which I'm finding tough, mainly the learning style. I'm realising I take much more in from audio rather than reading, so have thoroughly enjoyed your podcast."
Well, best of luck with the studies, Kira. And yeah, we do anecdotally find that a lot of people take more information in better by listening than they do by reading.
I think I do, actually.
Yeah. Then we had Wojciech Romaszko got in touch to say, "I come from Poland and live in Germany. I work in finance and wine is my passion. Thank you for such an insightful and entertaining podcast. I only recently discovered it while travelling through Oceania, and I've been tuning in during drives through remote countries like Vanuatu, from where I'm writing this message, and Samoa. I particularly admire your coverage of countries like Lebanon and Armenia. I vividly recall sitting in a wine bar in Yerevan tasting Sireni-based wine from Nagorno-Karabakh and reflecting on the resilience of winemaking in such a troubled region. By the way, you've got me craving Tolpuddle Pinot, but it's sold out and impossible to get in Australia."
Oh, we do love that Tolpuddle Pinot,
We do,
don't we?
yeah.
I'm sorry if we've championed it a bit too much. Finally, Paul Fanning wrote in to say, I'm an Irish wine lover writing to you from Dublin. I'm a relatively new fan of your outstanding podcast. I found particularly moving the episodes regarding wine production in Lebanon, Palestine, Israel, and other Middle Eastern and North African countries. The main reason I am writing to you is in response to your fascinating Vines of the Future episode. Last night, my husband and I, along with a friend, enjoyed our first Pee-wee wine, which was also our first Irish wine, can you believe? Luscarondo, a triple gold winner at the 2024 Pee-wee Awards. Pardon the national pride. And absolutely delicious. Thank you for your wonderful work and for enriching the lives of your listeners. Keep up the good work.
That's one we definitely haven't tried. I'll have to put a link on our show notes to that one. Thanks, Paul.
No, we should. Yeah, quite right. And thank you for sharing, Paul. Yes, and indeed, all of you who've so kindly written in or sent a SpeakPipe message. Sorry we can't air all views and questions, but we really do appreciate you taking the time to get in touch. If you move to do that right now, just head to our website show notes where you can find an email address as well as the magic SpeakPipe button if you'd prefer to send us a voice note.
On that theme, can we invite you to give us a rating and review wherever you're listening to this? We've had quite a few of those over the years, and it's always a thrill. So we'd love to have some more, please. Even if you've already done one, maybe pick up on a particular show you've liked or something that sets this pod apart from the rest. It helps other wine lovers find the show too, which is so important in terms of building the community around the pod and ensuring its longer term survival.
So there we have it. Thanks to everyone who's contributed to this show in one way or another, and thanks to you for listening. Until next time, cheers.